Renegades by Marissa Meyer, Chapter 17. Adrian was beaming when he entered the lounge. In the hours since he'd gotten permission from his dad for his team to handle the library surveillance mission, he'd already been to visit the location of their first non-patrol task. He hadn't gone inside the library, but he'd staked out an abandoned office building just across the street that would provide them with a perfect place to set up. In a particular corner office with a window looking straight into the alleyway around the library's east side, where a back door struck him as the perfect entrance for shady people coming to do shady dealings. He'd made a list of supplies, from binoculars to snack foods to a deck of cards, because a bored Oscar was a dangerous thing. Mostly, though, his head had been full all morning of fantasies in which his team not only uncovered a ring of black market weapon dealings and put Jean Cronin behind bars, but where they easily tracked down and arrested Nightmare too. He spotted Oscar and Ruby playing Battle to the Death, one of the two standing arcade games in the lounge, there to keep the patrol units entertained when they waited for an assignment. The game was a classic two-person combat challenge, and Oscar and Ruby developed an instantaneous rivalry when it had been brought in the year before. As far as Adrian could tell, their skills continued to be neck and neck, to each of their own continued frustrations. He came to stand behind them as Ruby's avatar did a roundhouse kick that sent Oscar's flying off screen. Ruby whooped and flung her hands outward in celebration, smacking Adrian in the nose. He cried out and pulled back, adjusting his glasses with one hand and pressing the other over his nose. Ruby recoiled. "Sorry," she squeaked, though her look of remorse quickly turned to a suspicious scowl. "Except not really, creepy stalker guy. How long were you standing there?" "About 2 seconds," said Adrian, scrunching his nose a couple times to clear the painful tingling that was running through the cartilage. "Oh," said Ruby. "In that case, I'm sorry." She paused. "Except still not really, because I'd totally just beat Oscar's high score." She pumped her fist into the air. "The battle is far from over," said Oscar, leaning against the machine. "I demand a rematch." Ruby popped her knuckles. "You can have as many rematches as you'd like. I'm never giving up this lead." "Hey guys," said Adrian. "Where's the new girl? You didn't scare her off already, did you?" "Changing," said Oscar, jerking a thumb over his shoulder while Ruby deposited a new coin to the machine slot. "Oh," said Adrian, glancing toward the private rooms, just as a figure emerged from the hall. He straightened. "Oh." Nova caught his eye and seemed to falter mid-step. Breaking away from the others, Adrian approached her, tucking his hands into his pockets. He was still in jeans and a jacket himself, figuring there wasn't much point in putting on his uniform if they wouldn't be doing any patrol duty. "How does it feel?" he said. She glanced down, holding her bundled street clothes in one arm. She ran her other hand self-consciously down the side of the uniform. "Long?" Adrian followed the look and saw that the legs of the uniform were puddled on top of her sneakers. "But I can sew," she said. "I'll fix them when I get home." "Nah, don't worry about it. I'll have the alterations department pull another uniform and amend it. You'll have it tomorrow, or maybe the next day. They can get backed up right after the trials." Nova opened her mouth and could sense an argument building there, so he quickly added, "We didn't bring you on to be a seamstress." She hesitated, then closed her mouth again, and in that moment, Adrian realized what made her look so different when she'd first emerged from the hallway. At first, he thought it was just seeing her in uniform, a uniform that stood for bravery and strength, traits she displayed at the trials, but that were now exaggerated by the bold red R. But no, that wasn't it at all. She looked different because she seemed, in that moment, laughably, almost hysterically uncomfortable, nervous and maybe even a little awkward, rather like she'd had when he'd drawn the bracelet clasp onto her wrist. It almost didn't seem possible that this could be the same girl who had challenged the gargoyle with unwavering courage, who had manted nothing but fierce determination while surrounded by an entire arena of screaming spectators. "Here," said Adrian, pulling out his marker. "You need a bag." He moved towards the nearest table and sketched out a large tote bag, lifting it from the acrylic surface. He took the handles and gave it a shake, holding it open for Nova to drop her clothes into. "Thanks," she murmured, shoving the clothes inside. She wrapped her hands around the base of the bag's handles, almost as if she were avoiding touching Adrian's hands as she took it from him. "You sure do enjoy showing off with that trick, don't you?" Heat warmed the back of his neck. Had he been showing off? Well, it can be pretty convenient sometimes. Nova looked briefly like she would smile, and he started to wonder if she was teasing him. Anyway, he said, gesturing toward the corner of the lounge, you can put it in lockers over there while we give you the grand tour. A rage-filled scream pulled their attention toward the arcade game, where Oscar was laughing maniacally while Ruby pounded at the buttons. My controls froze up. This doesn't count. Please direct all complaints to the great scorekeeper in the sky, said Oscar, popping his knuckles in a mockery of how Ruby had done so before. Adrian capped his marker and tucked it away. Believe it or not, they're actually really great superheroes. Nova met his gaze, and he could tell she was unconvinced. Did you mention something about a grand tour? Adrian had planned on only taking Nova around to the areas of headquarters they used frequently as a team. The lounge she'd already seen, so he thought they would stop at the cafeteria and the training hall, then do a quick team simulation on the virtual reality floor and call it a day. But the second the four of them stepped into the elevators, Nova's curiosity surprised him. She wanted to know about the armory and how they distinguished what weapons were housed there versus those that were stored in the vault specifically intended for powerful Prodigy artifacts. She wanted to see the laboratories and research and development, and though they didn't have clearance to go inside, Adrian caught her craning her head to see through an open door as one of the technicians passed by. She was curious about the forensics work, the investigation departments, council hall, and the state-of-art prison cells. Though, here again, Adrian can only describe them to her as best as he could. He had never actually been inside to see them himself. To his surprise, she even wanted to see the call center, located far up on the 75th floor of the building. Ruby and Oscar gave half-hearted attempts to talk her out of it, explaining that it really wasn't all that interesting. But Nova's enthusiasm for the various aspects of the organization, even the dull aspects, was becoming contagious. He and his team spent so much time on the streets communicating with headquarters that, through hasty messages transmitted into their communication bands, it was easy to forget just how complex their whole system was. Seeing Nova's wide-eyed intrigue and trying to answer her empathetic questions reminded him that the Renegades had become so much more than the group of vigilantes seeking to defend people of the world. They were still protectors, but they were now inventors, lawmakers, and activists. They were working to improve a society in 100 different ways at any given time. Seeing how interested in it all, Nova would serve to make him more interested in it too. Arriving on the 75th floor, they stepped out of the elevator onto a circular platform that looked every row upon row of computer desks. The surrounding walls were taken up by satellite imagery projected in real time onto massive screens, some showing Gatlin City, others the nearby suburbs or other parts of the country. Green lines, red markers, and digital notes were becoming constantly added and removed from the screens, and the room buzzed with activity. Phones ringing, staff barking into their headsets and clacking at their keyboards. People shouting orders or demanding to know the status of various ongoing situations. A home invasion being reported on C-14. How fast can a patrol team get over there? That landlord on East Bracken is complaining about the graffiti again. Do we have a cleanup crew available? I needed a squad to check out this bomb threat outside the arena. What's Metallock's status? Metallock is still dealing with that explosion in Murkwater, but we can send dead drops. He says this is the 4th time his store has been vandalized in the past 2 months. I swear, didn't we already catch these guys? We have a situation at the B-Mart on 62nd. Sounds like a man who's getting aggressive over receiving incorrect change? Adrian leaned his elbows on the rail that rimmed the platform. We think of this as the nervous system of the city. He said, distress calls come here, the situation is assessed, and a patrol team, or sometimes a solo renegade, is assigned to deal with it. Much more efficient than prowling the streets at night, searching for crime, said Ruby, which is what they did in the old days. More efficient, said Oscar, heaving a dramatic sigh, but not nearly as glamorous. It's amazing how they could pull this together in such a short period of time, said Nova. The laboratories, the virtual reality simulators, how did they build this in just 9 years? 10 years. 9 years, said Ruby. 8, corrected Adrian. They took over this building 8 years ago. It was home to squatters during the Age of Anarchy, but was abandoned by the time the council decided to make it their headquarters. As for turning it into this, he gestured around the bustling call center. When you have a team full of metalworkers and earth elements, prodigies who have basic telekinesis skills and super strength, not to mention one really helpful cyber linguist, it tends to come together pretty fast. A cyber linguist? A prodigy who can communicate with cybernetic technology, he explained. He's our tech guy. Nova hummed, and he couldn't quite read her reaction. Her gaze turned to a map of Gatlin City. Her eyes tracking a yellow dot as it blinked its way down Drury Avenue. You seem short-handed. Adrian nodded. It is a problem these days. Then why turn so many prodigies away at the trials? We're only short-handed when it comes to patrols. The rest of the system is fine, but we need more people who can be out on the streets handling criminals and enforcing the laws. So these days we only take recruits we think will be suited to that. He frowned. Though I'll be the first to admit that the trials probably aren't the best way for us to be finding new talent, but it isn't up to me. Who is it up to? The council? Everything, Ruby said with a cheerful laugh. Everything is up to the council. Pretty much. What we do here, it isn't just fighting crime anymore or even helping people. It's about keeping the city from falling apart again. And for that, we need unity. And, well, as obnoxious as the trials might get, they do bring people together. Nova's gaze continued to dart around the room. So, why do you keep dealing with things like painting over graffiti or stepping in on behalf of a clerk who can't figure out the correct change? Why not set up a non-prodigy police force to deal with situations that don't need a superhero? A non-prodigy police force? Said Oscar amused. No one would apply. Why not? Said Nova. That's what they had before the Age of Anarchy. Because now they have superheroes to handle these things for them, Oscar said with a mild shrug. But it's their city too, Nova insisted. Their lives, their livelihoods. They can't expect prodigies to do everything for them all the time. Her attention switched to Adrian, but he wasn't sure how to respond. It was true that it would help them a lot to be able to hand over some of the lower priority assignments to a civilian police force, but he couldn't help feeling Oscar was right. With the Renegades willing to shoulder all the responsibility, why should anyone apply for such a force? Nova's shoulders sank a little. Or not? We could suggest it's the council, chirped Ruby. Maybe start inviting people who were police officers before the Age of Anarchy to apply for a special task force. Adrian nodded. I could mention it to my dads when I see them later. Beside him, Nova seemed tense, and a moment later she shifted her weight, pulling a few inches away from him. He hadn't even realized just how close they'd been standing. He scanned her face, but it had gone unreadable as she scrutinized a map of the Wallow Ridge neighborhood. He cleared his throat. Ready to go see the training hall? Nova's face cleared as she spun back to him, and whatever discomfort he'd sensed vanished so quick he'd wondered if he'd only imagined it. Her smile was sudden and eager. Absolutely.